Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
Yes, I have the presentation. Do you want that I use your presentation here?
Whatever is best. If I can share it, I can share it. If I have.
No, but let me give you the presentation rights. No, I don't know what now. Now you should be able to present.
Okay.
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, now I just have to. And now you see it in full screen, right?
Yes, yes. So as I said, thank you very much, Adrian, for joining us today. And let me introduce very briefly, okay, just for the recording of the session. Today we will speak about sustainable investments. As you see in the screen, private capital instruments to finance green and social projects inside cluster networks. It's a extremely interesting point. So thank you, Adrian Brown from Arctic Values to share with us. And after you, we will open the floor for everybody. Thank you, Adrian.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Antonio, for having me and for the invitation. And I introduced myself also very briefly. So I am actually originally from Germany, but I live for quite many years now in northern Finland, actually in Lapland. And yeah, I have my own business. I'm working very much with many aspects and topics affiliated to the topic of sustainable development. But apart from my own business and working with sustainable investments that we will discuss in the next few minutes more in depth, I'm also a university lecturer and I'm also a researcher. So I have some sort of different occupations. But for today, we will talk particularly about sustainable investments, and we'll link it to the issue of how clusters can utilize it, either if it's the cluster organizations, cluster companies, or just the member organizations inside a cluster. And we can link it and also follow up to the issue how we can tackle this financial crisis that is going along with the pandemic crisis that we all are facing right now. And yeah, and I think this is the whole initiative from this webinar series is very timely and very important. And I enjoyed to participate in quite many sessions, particularly in the summer. I had more time and not so many other meetings at the same time to do that. So, but it's great to have the opportunity today also to introduce briefly the topic of sustainable investments. And now, yes, now here we are. So yeah, but this is the reasoning. So when I'm doing my work regarding sustainable investments, I traveled quite a lot around European Union, visiting several conferences, seminars, now also more and more webinars in this year. And I'm just coming across that there are many great ideas on the desks of project managers. Either it's in municipalities, it's in cities, if it's in universities, from academia and so on. And there's a lot of great ideas regarding circular economy initiatives, bioeconomy, or renewable energies and sustainable solutions. So I think a lot of topics that many of you are working with in the fields and also in your clusters. And what I came across also very often is, of course, the challenge that you may be familiar with is how to finance these sort of green projects, the sustainability projects that are in our minds. And by particularly considering here the Nordic countries, where I have done most of my work, even though I'm working across the European Union. So it's very often that the project ideas are linked to the financing solutions of the European Union. So when it comes to Horizon 2020, or now in the follow-up Horizon Europe, or Interreg projects. So a lot of this public sector funding is usually what is perceived as a valid solution. And I think this is absolutely fine and a good thing to approach, but I also think it's not the only pathway to approach. So just because we all know that these funding bodies, they are very competitive. So it is, even though the European Commission and inside the European Union, lots of capital is provided, but for all the needs in terms of sustainable development, and also when it comes now to the recovery from the financial crisis linked to the pandemic crisis. So more and more capital is needed, particularly also for this recovery. So what is needed also, not just having a look what is possible from the public sector, but also having a look into the international investment community. What could private capital investors do in order to finance our, so to say, green projects? So, and there we can have a look also what the institutional investors are doing, and also we can institutional investors are, for example, banks, insurance companies, pension funds, but there are more actors from the private investment community. And what is of interest right now, and I will come to this in a very few minutes, is that more green capital is available. So there are more and more financial instruments on the rise, and I will support this with a few figures and charts in a moment. And this is an opportunity for the clusters also and the cluster members to get access and to diversify financing solutions in order to just move the project ideas from the desks into implementation, so that they're not just vanishing at some point and will be always just only in our heads. And when it comes to this private capital funding, so often we're coming across with the challenge of financial terminology, that it can be sometimes a bit complicated, and because sometimes there are several terms for the same meaning. And but what I would like to, the appeal that I make is that we should not be too much worry about these kind of issues. So because often it is less complicated than it seems at first, and this is also where I dedicate my work to. So just to take away a bit the fears and this intention, so that this private investments, that they are not possibly for us, because possibly that's too complicated. It's not always the case. I refer briefly to the topic of green recovery. So and what is this webinar series, of course, also is about. So the financial crisis that is somewhat ongoing as long as we have the pandemic crisis, as long as we're facing lockdowns, and as long as several of our ideas and initiatives are on hold. So of course, we still can think about what can we do when it comes to the recovery programs. And it's just two pathways that how this recovery can be done. So it can be just, we can get back on track on the conventional way, or even can use this as an opportunity and focus more on sustainability issues, and instead of moving on with, so to say, conventional projects, also giving a larger share to circular and bioeconomy initiatives, particularly as this green capital is available more and more on the international markets. And I just also suggest that the clusters have a look further, and I know many of the clusters across Europe do this already. So, but just to bring this also into this context. So let's have a look into the sustainable finance instruments and how they have developed over the past few years. So it's really something that when we're just looking back 6, 7, 8 years, there had not been that much investments into the so-called sustainable finance segments. So, but since then, particularly I think, and since 2014, the growth is evident. And here we see several of so-called green financial instruments. So these are so to say investment instruments, and these are just the ones that are linked to the debt securities. Well, today time is limited. Perhaps in the discussion we can talk a bit about the difference between debt securities and also equity markets. But this is, even I can say, is just one side of the coin, and this is already growing a lot. While the green bond, or sometimes referred also as climate bond, is this financial product that has prevailed, to the largest extent to this day. And I will explain in a few minutes this also a bit further, how this is working. But there are other so-called bonds and loans linked to sustainability purposes. And we see that, every year more and more billions of dollars equivalent. This is a figure chart from Bloomberg. And when I worked in the finance sector, particularly in corporate governance sector, so then Bloomberg was a source to follow on a daily basis, because they're just focusing, like other analysts, very much on what's going on the international capital markets. But we see here in the blue scheme, in the blue columns, so the green bonds are the ones who have prevailed the largest, and it is a continuous growth. And as far as we can outlook, this growth is going to continue, particularly once the crisis is over. Probably more and more of these bonds are going to be issued. Also, just very briefly linking, because my work is also dedicated to circular economy, green financing solutions from the private capital markets. And it's interesting that now specific funds are available, both in the debt securities and in the equity markets. And when we just have a look at, 2 years ago, there was were not that many, and now all of a sudden specific funds are established just for circular economy and so for sustainability purposes. But this is also something to have a look when your clusters are working with issues like circular economy, recycling, waste management, and this works. It can even be extended to renewable energies or to bioeconomy initiatives to some extent. So this is just another segment that's growing, and here is also from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation analysis, so that there is so the private market funds in this perspective, and they're also growing quite extensively. And it wouldn't be a surprise if these numbers are rising in the years to come as well. Just linking also based on my work, I had worked together, for example, with technology clusters. So I think it's great to have a focus and combine sustainability issues with technology initiatives, digitalization initiatives. And I know that quite many clusters across Europe work with these issues as well. So here's also opportunities to have a look into green financial instruments, and perhaps to get financing from these sort of sources. And also what I can mention briefly is that when it comes to my particular work, I'm not only just promoting the green investments, but when I'm working with somebody together, or when I'm joining a project, so I try to figure out the best ways to approach. So it's not only about the advantages and the promotion of green investments, but I'm showing and talking also about risks and threats. Of course, it's not for everybody, and business, and very often these private investments, when you just seek them, then the project has to be profitable. But I noticed that sustainable investments across Europe, for instance, again, circular economy and bioeconomy, they are very often profitable, and it may be the right solution, instead of just seeking, for example, Horizon 2020 funding to go for the private investments. And therefore, I will explain briefly how a climate bond or a green bond, how this could work like. So this can be issued from very different organizations. It can be issued just by a company, for instance, also a cluster company, could be a municipality, could be a city. So it can be really different organizations. And of course, first of all, there should be some sort of project idea. So let's think that there is, for example, a bioenergy power plant somewhere for a region. Perhaps there is a cluster in the region, and there is an energy demand for renewable energies. So let's say we need, for example, 50 million euros for a project. And so we just have to make a decision. So in this time, we are not seeking any funding from public sources, but we want to issue a green bond. And just to mention, climate bond and green bond, these are synonyms. So this is also some sort of the financial terminology. So when we talk about them in the international markets, they mean actually the same. So when we are looking for this 50 million investment, we just have our goals, for example, decrease of carbon footprints and being more efficient regarding our energies and so on. And we have to make a decision where to issue this green bond. So that would be a stock exchange. So it could be, for example, the stock exchange in Luxembourg. They have specialized for green bonds, but there are several others like Helsinki, Stockholm, Oslo, and several other stock exchanges. So this is possible and free to decide for the project developers. And then when we have decided about the amount that we need, for example, 50 million euros, we have to decide the time span. Could be, for example, 10 years, 20 years for a bioenergy power plant. And we have to think about, so what will be the coupon? This is the interest rate that the investors in the end will receive annually. So, and with green bonds, fortunately, they are quite low. There are even a few that have even interest rates of only 1.2% or something like that. I took as an example here 2.2%. So this is what the investors will receive. And when we have, when we're seeking 50 million euros, then and once the bond is issued on the stock exchange, for example in Luxembourg, so then the global investors, they just probably can see this on their screens. Maybe the investor from New York, somewhere on the Wall Street, is saying, "Oh, there's a great project from a cluster in the European Union. That's great. I'm going there with 5 million euros, so 10%." Then maybe there's another investor from Singapore also having a look on the screens, saying, "Okay, I'm going this with 3 million euros." And maybe there are some medium-sized investors with 100,000 euros, 200,000. But then it's maybe also close to the cluster region, or maybe cluster members themselves privately invest into this with some sort of savings of 5,000 or 10,000 euros. And they can also be part of this. And in the end, this is the whole investment community. So, so to say, the portfolio of this particular bond, and they are all investors. And the attractive thing, the charming thing about the green bonds is that the project developers, so the ones in this case that are developing the bioenergy power plant, so that they are keeping full control over the project. So it's not like with angel investments, so that often that they are just come and want to take control when they have 20, 30% shares of a project and saying and just demanding in what direction you're going. But in this case with the green bonds, so the project initiators, they just keep full control. For the investors, it's just attractive to have a safe location or allocation for their capital, that they will get the interest rates. And what they can also do is they can trade the bonds on the markets. So sometimes they fall and rise a bit in value. That's interesting for speculation. But this is none of concern for the ones who are issuing the bond and who are developing the project. For them, in our case, it's only important to get, for example, this 50 million euros. And I just took here as an example the city of Gothenburg in Sweden. And they have issued several bonds just to modernize the city center, the city port, and also to tackle the issue of pollution in the city. So they are actually the first city that has issued several bonds. So that's why they got attention from that. And this is a quite popular case and a successful case study from green bonds. And this just briefly highlights how the green bond market is growing. It's from the Climate Bonds Initiative. They provide also great data when it comes to the quantification of what's going on this market. And I can just say a few years back, this map was almost empty. And we're just thinking 7, 8 years back, and particularly only 2, 3 years back, it was much, much less investment. But now more and more actors across Europe are seeking this financial instrument and found that it's working fine for them. And that's a possibility to raise green capital to finance sustainability projects. And there's also more and more capital available because the investors, so when we have our investor in New York or in Amsterdam and Frankfurt or Singapore, and so they have more and more pressure themselves. So because there is requirements for sustainable development and because they are not so invisible anymore, there's more and more criticism towards investments that are not that much in line with sustainable investments and not that much in line with, for example, climate change goals, circular economy goals, and other important issues that are on political agendas. But this is very much on the growth, and this chart highlights this as well. And well, a few weeks back in one of the sessions, in one of these morning sessions in this webinar series, I mentioned as a comment the Pestana group case. So this is this hotel chain from Portugal. And I think it's maybe a good idea just to explain a bit further this idea, because they are the ones that were the first who issued green bond, particularly for the construction of green hotels. So this was around 1 year ago. And so what they were intending to do is, okay, they had the idea, we want to build 2 green hotels. One, I think, in the region of South Lisbon, and the other one somewhere at the Algarve. And so they just contacted their investment partner, that would be BBVA, this large multinational bank. And then they just made up decisions. So what they were thinking is that, okay, for our green hotels, we need 50 million euros. So again, this figure. And this is something we need to construct this eco resorts. So they issued the bond on the stock exchange, and what happened very quickly is that global investors, that they have even showed interest for more than 3 times. So more than 150 million euros were quickly available. And then they made a decision together with BBVA, so the Pestana Group management. They just made the decision, okay, if we have so much capital available, then let's issue this bond even for 60 million euros to construct these 2 eco resorts, or these 2 hotels. And they just made a decision, okay, the lifespan quite short, only 6 years, and they gave a coupon, so the interest rate of 2.5%, what is for this in these days for a bond, for a green bond, even quite attractive. And we could see that there was large interest from the global investment community. And I mean, this is just something, this is applicable in so many fields. I mean, this also can be something like that, can also work for clusters, and it's happening, of course, all the time. I mean, this is just one of the examples how it is going on right now in this what happens in the international markets. And I think it's just an interesting case, and that's why I also present this today. Another case is from Finland, and this is just called Municipality Finance, and they have raised more than 1 billion euros in green bonds on the capital markets in the recent years, and they provide sub-loans to investors and in particular to municipalities and cities in Finland. And all their projects have to be linked to, for example, sustainable buildings, energy efficiency, renewable energy, waste management. So these are just these sectors. And in this way, it's possible also to promote sustainability projects and to finance them in the end. And these loans that they provide to the municipalities and cities in Finland, they are also with quite low interest rates. So it's a great opportunity to get to receive cheap capital to really implement and realize sustainability projects. I would just briefly refer also what the European Commission has achieved recently. So there is this new green finance taxonomy, and when it comes to green investments, it's important to think and discuss, so what is in fact a sustainability project and what is not. And the European Commission has helped here a lot by just this year launching this taxonomy. And what they have in mind particularly is that a sustainability project, when it's financed with this under the umbrella of sustainable investments, that there are 6 overall environmental goals. You can see them here: climate change mitigation and adaptation, protection of water and marine resources, circular economy also, and biodiversity, for example. And what is important for everybody who has a sustainability project, and I think it's something that clusters can also refer and utilize when it comes to project planning. So there's one of these environmental goals has to be followed, at least, can be more, but only one is required. But it is important that none of the others is violated at the same time. So this is that is a very important aspect. So and when this sort of requirements are fulfilled, then it is under this guidance, under this taxonomy, overall and a sustainable investment. And sometimes it was before in the last few years a bit blurry. So where is the edge? What is actually a sustainable investment? Where does it start, or what is it not yet, and so on. And finally, for today, I just would refer briefly to the new concept of environmental, social, and governance. And I'm also facilitating workshops in this respect and support clusters and other organizations in the projects with that. So this means environmental, social, and governance. And this is something that is quite similar to sustainable development concept, but is particularly designed for the investment community. So this is something when the investment community is not looking anymore only for the profit schemes, revenues, and costs in a project, but when they are interested in sustainability issues, they look into this particular segment of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And of course, they would like to know if somebody is seeking capital for sustainable investments. So to what extent do they address these issues? To what extent are they aware of their own environmental performance, own social performance, and about how they issue how they manage the issue of corporate governance? And here's also where I support, because very often the project managers know very well, for example, about the environmental impacts, because there are the engineers and the technological analysis and so on. This is very often very clear across Europe when it comes to sustainability projects, but then there's this governance aspect. And the issue of governance is that this is, like so often with the terminology, it's sometimes a bit blurry and a bit complicated, and there are different understandings what corporate governance in fact means. So, and I worked previously in Brussels in the corporate finance sector, and was in the corporate governance department. So I know how investors understand it, and I can just say investors have a clear understanding what is corporate governance. And of course, when somebody is using it in a different context, then it can be perhaps a bit confusing or misleading in the whole communication process. So this is why it is very good to follow environmental, social, and governance metrics. And this is just a list that I came up with. It's not a complete list. I mean, there can be many, many more of metrics, but this is just an overall summary of 10 possible metrics in each segment: environmental, social, and governance. And when it comes to governance, it can be, for example, very important. What is happening with the board remuneration? To what extent are gender issues considered, business ethics, accounting? And then it should be designed in a specific way that investors also understand, and that they really can quantify this information in a quite short time, because investors often do not have time to read reports that are hundreds of pages. So it's quite important also to digest this in a quite short time frame. So what I just propose, what is very new, is also that somebody who's seeking green investments should follow up with ESG reporting. And this is a report. So it can be just similarly done to a sustainability report, and it can be also quite beneficial when somebody establishes a project. So, and in this ESG report, you just put emphasis on the environmental, social, and governance aspects. And then in the end, when you issue a bond, for example, the investors are having just a look, okay, have they done their homework, these investment seekers? And when they see, okay, there is a project that have even an ESG report attached, so then they can familiarize themselves also with the ecological and social benefit of a project. And this may be the difference maker of who is in the end getting the capital that is required. So this is just in very few words the introduction into sustainable investments. And of course, it's quite challenging. It's quite a far-reaching topic. So, and let's have a bit of discussion about that. And of course, you can contact me if you have further interest and further like to have talk about this further. But for the moment, thank you.
You are very welcome, Adrian. I think it has been very clear and detailed. Thank you very much. now it's time to open the floor. Who wants to ask, comment, give us another references?
Yes. Yes, Antonio, good morning. Can I make a question to Adrien? A very short question. Adrien, thank you very much for your very good presentation. One of the aspects that I think is becoming very important in this kind of projects is the way that we monitorize and evaluate the ongoing and the impacts of the project and the return that we have from the investment. How do you see that? Do you have some experience about these metrics, this kind of monetization and evaluation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with that on a daily basis. That is something where I see just potential. I mean, just as I said, so I have met quite many actors across Europe and even beyond that have, of course, the need to finance their projects. And so, do you mean exactly so what I am doing, or what kind of potential? Maybe just before I'm.
What kind of potential? What kind of potential do you think you have?
Well, what I'm particularly approaching is just figuring ways together with the people I'm working with. So what is the right path to follow? Should they follow the path of public financing? Should they follow the path of private financing? Perhaps having a look into both directions to some extent. It is also a matter of allocating time. Because as we all know, when it comes to public financing, it takes a lot of time often and a lot of working hours to allocate into these initiatives. And as it is very competitive, it may be not the best way to approach. And to some extent, what I also argue is this environmental social governance topic, this can be perhaps even linked to public financing solutions. So when we are applying, for example, for a Horizon 2020 project and make a difference here. But when it comes to the potential, it's just as long as projects are profitable in the mid-run or in the long run, so it is actually a quite safe place to go to finance projects like this, because as long as there is profitability, then these projects have actually not much to fear in not succeeding. So does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, more comments, questions from the attendants?
Good morning. Thank you, Adrian, for this fantastic presentation. When you mention profitable, you mention financially or also socially?
Oh, yeah, I mean, in this context I just mentioned, I mean particularly financially. So that's when somebody is seeking green investments, the issue is, of course, it needs to be paid back in the end. So I just jumped back to one of the slides that I showed, this one. So important is, of course, also the time span, and it is important that interest rates are paid to the investors in the end. So I mean that in this perspective, yeah, if financial success is needed or somebody who's backing it up. Of course, if there is a social project, it can be involved. There can be also public actors involved, because as I said, cities and municipalities are also eligible to issue these bonds. And for example, like with other loans that they are taking, perhaps they're just backing it up with state funds, with pension funds or whatever. And then it does not have to be necessarily profitable, but it just needs to be a backup how to finance this in the end. But Aurora, you're also raising a very important point about the social benefits, because this is something that is also of interest, also when we're thinking now about how to get back on track from the coronavirus. And there's actually lots of capital also available when it comes to the social bonds and social aspects. And there's more and more of these projects. And I really would, if I would have another hour, I would like to introduce a few other of these financial instruments also that are linked to social impacts and how they can be achieved. because it's very meaningful and very much of interest also when it comes to the recovery of the crisis. But for the introduction for today, I put more emphasis now on this green bond, because this is the tool that has been prevailed the furthest to this extent on the international markets. But the social aspects, and I personally are also very much interested into that, how this is addressed. And also when it comes to a recovery from the corona crisis, that we have put emphasis on social issues, like we have quite many negative impacts, of course, as we all know. Does it answer your question, or so would you like to follow up?
It does. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Aurora, did you know about this kind of instruments? Do you have references of using them in your environment?
Well, not totally. I know, and Hugo Ortiz can explain a little more, because Hugo created this association to fight the carbonization of our world and to do social work, and the model has to be financed. And also on my company we do circular projects, circular economy projects, and we've been trying to gain some Horizon 2020 and even PT 2020. So I knew some, but not all of this. I've learned a lot today. Thank you.
Well, very welcome, Aurora. Obrigado. So, Hugo, could you share with us your view, your experience?
Yes, I'm here. Nothing to comment right now, just listening and learning. And thank you, Adrian, for your presentation.
Okay. Any other comment or question? What kind of, Adrian, what kind of services do you provide from your company? What kind of activity, articles, values develop?
It's particularly, well, I started just to focus on issues linked to sustainable development, so also a bit corporate social responsibility reporting and support with that. Now, as the demand is rising so much and there's so much interest into that, I'm focusing almost all of my time to the sustainable investments topic. And we can break it down particularly to two initiatives. So I'm facilitating workshops. So, for example, I mentioned the technology aspect. So I was, for example, in Tallinn, in Estonia, and there's a big cluster with 200 companies, and the University of Technology is also attached to that. They are in this, well, Estonia is a small country, but the technology aspect and digitalization is quite interesting what's going on there. So that was, so I just went there and gave a one-day workshop and introduced specifically what kind of financial instruments are available, what kind of balancing is possible between public and private sector financing. And I just went, because of the time, much further than I can be today. So, and I introduced more of these financial tools that are available. And as I said, so there's more than just the green bonds. And particularly also when we're thinking about social aspects. And the other part of what I'm doing, I just join projects and support these kind of projects. I can mention one case from Helsinki, as I'm based in Finland. So I worked together with the city of Helsinki. They gave, that was also in the end of last year. And what they were developing was a new sustainable tourism program for the next 7 years. So starting from this year. And what they are seeking is also the construction and the investments into green hotels in the capital area. So that is, so they are looking very much forward to being more attractive for conferences in the Helsinki area, for international conferences and congresses. And they want that international investors construct green hotels. And what I have done is I have contributed to this project, introduced sustainable finance, and what kind of tools, and green bond is an important one in this perspective, are available, and I did some analysis, provided charts and figures in this perspective. So that's this is also, these are probably the main services that I'm doing. Yeah.
Thank you and congratulations. Okay. Any other comment or question?
Good morning, everyone. I was just writing in the chat a question, Adrian. You said that there are a lot of issuers who could actually issue a climate bond, but in your experience, who is currently in this game? Saying who are the entities that are issuing these climate bonds and initiate this creation? We see here in this chart, it could be a city, a municipality, a corporation, but who is actually doing it right now?
Well, it's quite diverse. It's quite many actors, and also can mention that it doesn't have to be always the large capital investments. So it's quite often that it's the seeking for 50 million or 500 million euros. So, but it can be, for example, can be small scale companies that are striving for a renewable energy project. Sometimes also with something like 5 million euros or 1 million euros or something like that. The issue is there is no minimum requirement or minimum amount of capital that has to be issued. The only issue that has to be considered is that the partner, the investment firm, that they require some transaction costs. So if somebody is seeking perhaps only 10,000 euros, that's maybe too little, because already the transaction costs would be higher than just the implementation of the project. But there are several projects with less than 500,000 euros available. And well, what kind of actors are issuing that? So there are meanwhile quite many cities that are doing this, but the largest extent is still the corporate sector. So it's mostly companies. Sometimes there are municipality companies. But it's not the easy answer, because it's quite diverse, and bonds are a financial instrument that has prevailed for many decades. The conventional bond and the green bond, from the technical aspect, works exactly the same, like the bonds that we all know that are also our national governments across Europe issue all the time. So it's just the green bond is just a specific idea that there is a sustainability purpose behind, so that there should be a positive sustainability impact in the end. But yeah, as you also said again, so it's cities, it's municipalities, but to the largest extent corporations. I mean, I just came across coincidentally the city of Hong Kong, and it's a city company. They just renew the whole metro system right now in an eco-friendly way. And so that's from another part in the world, but China is also very active in issuing green bonds. They're taking all kinds of investments in all directions, sustainability or not. So and Hong Kong has there just now a large scale green project. I came across with that. And Germany has also a very interesting initiative going on right now. Here we have a governmental bond, and they are seeking now also sustainable investments. And as in Germany, they are still want to try it out in the first place, if these green bonds working in the way that they're hoping for. So they have developed a scheme of twin bonds. So they are just issuing a bond with a sort to say conventional bond, and then they issue at the same time a second bond that is a green bond to the same conditions. And then they just have a look how they perform simultaneously. And this way, they are just quite sure that the conventional bond is also some sort of safe place if there are investors that do not feel that confident about green investments right now, and would rather prefer in their portfolios to invest into conventional bonds. And it's not that Germany is not believing in the green bonds, then they would not have issued that at all. But it is just also a little of experiment how to compare the performances, and it's also a quite interesting initiative, and it's also very welcome on the international green bond markets. What is going on there in this perspective? So yeah, and I could talk for many more hours, but to keep the answer, I stop here in this perspective.
Thank you. Do you have references on clusters using these bonds?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is something we should also do an analysis more, where exactly the clusters are particularly involved. I mean, there are several companies that are members of the clusters, or there's even sometimes universities, large-scale universities, they also issue bonds and they are also members of clusters. The question is then, and this is sometimes maybe not that easy to figure out, to what extent they communicate this inside the cluster, or to what extent they are doing this rather individually. So that is a question. I tried to find, but I did not find across Europe where really cluster organizations, so this umbrella organizations and the clusters, where they are proactively have issued the climate bonds. I think there's still to a larger extent the focus on public financing and having a look into Horizon 2020 and so on. But as I said, and as I showed in the chart, it is rather new. I mean, we are not even in a decade into a position where it's really quite large scale amounts of capital risen with these sustainable investments. So if we have a look, it's just 5-6 years. It's not really a long time span. But it will something that carries along in the years to come, most likely, just because we know that we have the demands for circular economy, bioeconomy, and of course all the trouble that we are facing with the climate change topic, and also the outcome, of course, of the corona crisis. And I just also propose that clusters taking the leadership role here, and also just diversify, not getting away from public financing and Horizon Europe, what is coming now, something like that, but just diversify options and bring themselves in a better position in the projects to come. This is what I would propose, and I think is a good path to follow.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, you are totally right, but we could also play a role, as you said, on spreading the knowledge of these green bonds between our cluster members, as you say. It's something that it can be easily done. We are constantly supporting them on ways to funding their initiatives, and it's a very good knowledge. Okay, more question, comments from the rest of the attendants?
I mean, I just can follow up to what you just said, Antonio. So when I worked with the Technopole cluster together, so in this 200 companies, there was the initiative from the Nordic Council Minister's Office, and they just had the same idea that you just mentioned. So spreading the knowledge inside the cluster members, how to diversify financing. And that was the initiative to invite me. That's how they reached out to me, and that is why they invited me to one day just to discuss. Yeah, I think there were representatives of around 60 companies in the room that day, and it was well received. And afterwards, we had even we had a session with 7 specific chosen company members, somewhat startups that have also circular economy and waste management initiatives. So they were cluster members. And so on. We just were discussing what is the right path for you. And we were just discussing public financing, particularly discussing a few Horizon 2020 calls, and then just comparing it and linking it to possible financing from green bonds or some other sustainability bonds, or if it, in one case also, if it's possible to discuss a social impact bond. So I think it's a very good idea and important to spread the knowledge, what is possible. And then, and I think it's a good idea to do this inside the clusters.
Yeah.
Indeed.
We need to work on that. We were discussing at the beginning of the session on the presentation made by Marek past week during the Congress of Clusters, of financing or funding tools. And so we indeed need to work more in this aspect. Yeah, it's critical. We could mix both not both, all the tools and make a general review. So that's something that we have in our agenda for next sessions. But I will say thank you very much, Adrian. And Nina, which will be the next session? It's about the
On Wednesday, we will speak about the plastics and tooling value chain. So we will have 4 speakers from different clusters across Europe who are working together, and they will tell us about their cooperation, the challenges also for the plastics and tooling industry now with COVID and now the recovery.
Okay, perfect. So I think it's time to close. Thank you very much, Adrian. We will keep in contact. We will look for new opportunities to have your knowledge spread through the cluster community for sure. Thank you, everyone, and see you next Wednesday, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.